just I don't know whose clock that was that went off. Welcome to the April 28th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. As you can see, we are operating in a virtual environment for this meeting. I would like to ask for patience as we use this platform for the first time. There may be slight delays as we transition between speakers and participants. If any participants have issues with this technology, please send a message to the moderator. I assume you would do that via chat. Hopefully you know where the chat button is on your WebEx. We will discuss 5 requests today. For each item, staff will provide a presentation. The applicant will then be invited to speak. As is the case in our in-person meetings, the applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak on a particular item. Those opposed will also have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Each speaker other than the applicant will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. We ask that speakers not duplicate comments. After all the comments, the applicant will have 2 additional minutes to respond to issues or questions raised. At the conclusion of each portion, Planning Commission members can ask questions. I ask commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusion of each presentation. I also ask each commissioner to be recognized by the chairperson before speaking. I would appreciate if the commissioners post a request to ask a question in the chat of our WebEx session. So I'll try to respond to either raised hands or chat requests to ask questions or make comments. At the beginning of each regular Planning Commission meeting, we allow time for a comment period where anyone can speak for up to 3 minutes on any topic that does not appear on the agenda. We have 1 person who's signed up to speak today. I would ask that we hear from our speaker today, Michael Lindsay, at this time. Mr. Lindsay, you have 3 minutes to share your thoughts with us.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's fast. My questions are about the neighborhood meetings associated with rezoning request. And as all of y'all know, we used to have 2 CAC meetings following a applicant or a developer's meeting. The CAC meetings have gone away and we now have 2 neighborhood meetings. So one of my questions is, are city staff going to be at those meetings, and is there a public record of those meetings?
So I guess we should stop the clock here and respond to Mr. Lindsay. So Mr. Bowers, would you care to speak about that?
Yes, although not specified specifically in the code, at this time staff does plan to be available at these meetings, not as a presenter, but simply as a resource. Secondly, the applicant is responsible for documenting and submitting notes as to what occurred at the meeting. But staff presence at the meeting should be a check on making sure those notes are an accurate representation of what occurred at the meeting.
Mr. Lindsay, do you have more to say at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
So to clarify, the official record will be developed by the applicant and not by city staff. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. That is correct?
Correct.
Okay.
If I could interject, the ordinance also allows for any neighbor attendees of the meeting to submit written comments about the meeting. So there is an opportunity for members of the public to contribute to that record.
Okay, another question is, the first meeting with the applicant developer is going just to property owners within 500 feet. The second meeting, if I understand correctly, is going to property owners within 1,000 feet. Why is there a difference there?
Mr. Bowers, can you speak to that? Director Bowers.
Sorry, I'm having a little trouble getting myself unmuted. So the 500-foot radius is a legacy of the original neighborhood meeting that's always been a part of the rezoning process since the UDO was adopted. The additional 1,000 feet radius for the second meeting was for two reasons. One of which is in order for there to be a second meeting, the case is more impactful. It has to have passed certain thresholds for there to be a second neighborhood meeting. So the case will have a second neighborhood meeting, but based on our preliminary analysis, most or the vast majority will have a second neighborhood meeting. So once it's passed those additional thresholds showing that the case is impactful, then there's a wider notice radius for that second meeting. Also, the difference between the meetings is somewhat different. At the first meeting is a pre-application meeting. It's an opportunity for the applicant to get feedback from the more proximate neighbors to help refine their submission. The second meeting will occur after an application has been submitted and has undergone some level of staff review. For that reason, the case will probably be slightly different for the second meeting than it was at the first.
Okay. A follow-up question on that. The second meeting will be determined based on its significant impact. Are those is there a set of quantifiable stats that you're following, or is that kind of a judgment call?
There's 5 criteria. If the subject property is 5 acres or more, the proposed change increases maximum building height to 5 stories or more, increases residential density by an additional 10 dwelling units per acre, is a change from residential or conservation management zoning to a mixed use or special zoning district, and if the request is for a planned development district. So if any of those 5 boxes is checked, there's a second neighborhood meeting.
I got you. Another question. With the previous process that went through the CACs, there was staff people were there was records kept. Now that's as I understand from my previous question, that's up to the developer to pass that information along. The other question I had was in the CAC meetings, there was a non-binding vote by those in attendance who were residents near the property, whatever. Is that now history, or is the developer not going to ask for a vote or an opinion about the proposed project?
There's no requirement for there to be a vote of the attendees at the meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to get all the concerns regarding the rezoning case out on the table.
Okay. And I might be beating a dead horse here, but I'm just, is the developer going to present information back to the city that's made public? Is there any accountability? I'm concerned about where we're going with that.
Yes, so there's a requirement for a report. It has to include a list of persons and organizations contacted, the date, time, and location of the meeting, a roster of the persons in attendance, and a summary of issues discussed. And so staff will take in that report and check it to make sure that it is sufficient. It's a part of the process, and it becomes part of the case file and a public record related to the rezoning. Other than staff, as the attorney noted, attendees may also put in comments regarding what happened at the meeting or other issues they wish to raise about the zoning case. So if you've obtained that record and feel that it has not accurately represented what occurred at the meeting, there's an opportunity for participants in the meeting to make that view known.
How does that mechanism work? Does a resident go directly to the city or through the developer?
Would contact directly with the city.
Okay. And how is that? How is that done? Is that done via the internet, or?
You can phone us, you can email us, you can send us a paper letter, okay. You can drop something off at the office, any means that is convenient for you.
Okay. Let's see here.
But I said phone, but obviously it wouldn't be a written comment if it was just verbal. And so it would be best to submit it in some sort of writing, either on paper or via email.
Okay. A final question. with notifications for, it's going just to property owners, number one, as opposed to all residents. And if I understand correctly, the city is trying to work on that simply by putting out signs near the particular property. Is there going to be any effort to reach out to residents electronically using the city website or any other mechanisms?
Under the code as currently drafted, the two notice mechanisms are to send mailed notice to property owners and to post a sign. In our experience, though, a lot of people do notice the sign and do find out about rezoning matters by seeing the sign and looking up what the item is or contacting us about it.
Okay. All right. Well, I think those are my questions. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, we will move on now to the consent agenda, which is new for us. So our first order of business for this meeting is the new consent agenda. This is a list of requests that require a time extension. Instead of acting on each request individually, the commission can approve the time extension requests in one motion and vote. To be clear, the commission is not voting on the final disposition of any of these requests. We are simply asking the City Council for more time to consider and deliberate. With that, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda. So, would anyone like to unmute and, oh, Janitha, I have a hand raised.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, so all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, so the vote is unanimous. All right, I'm checking chat. So we had a couple of comments come in. We move on. So the motion to approve the consent agenda passes unanimously. Old business. We will now begin the old business portion of the agenda. These are requests that have appeared on previous Planning Commission agendas. Our first case is CP 1219, a request to amend map T1 street plan of the 2030 comprehensive plan. And we will have Mr. Don Bell to present on behalf of the city.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. This request would amend the street plan to extend Kinley Street to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and would also modify the interchange at Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and South Dawson and South McDowell Streets. The extension of Kinley Street would add a two-lane undivided avenue connecting South Salisbury Street to the site of this request. 120 Kinley Street is presently zoned DX20 and designated as Central Business District. Urban form designation is Downtown Core Transit Area. Here's an aerial view showing the site's proximity to major housing institutions and destinations in downtown Raleigh. This view shows the current terminus of Kinley Street. The building to the right is a former Duke Power office building. The site is located at the northern end of the Southern Gateway Area Plan. Six policies were identified that are consistent with the proposed street plan amendment element of the site. No inconsistent policies were identified. proposal site lies within the area identified in the Southern Gateway area, as well as the adopted Southern Gateway Corridor Study. The proposed amendment addresses several aspects of urban redevelopment and transportation that were cited in both documents. And there are no outstanding issues. This proposal would require an extension of the Planning Commission deadline if a recommendation is not made today. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I believe that the applicant has requested.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you trailed off, Mr. Belk. The applicant has requested.
Yes, the applicant, I believe, is signed on and has a presentation at the ready.
Before we do that, does anyone have any questions for staff? And there we go. I can now see you all. So either chat me or raise your hand. Any questions for staff at this point? Okay, let's move on. We are going to Mr. Barry Buckman, who will present on behalf of the applicant. As a reminder, the applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak. Mr. Buckman.
Jeffrey, this is Ronald Stevenson.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? It sounded like two people spoke at the same time.
Go ahead, Barry, if you want to say anything, then I can take it from there if you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm here to answer any questions and as a representative of the applicant, but we do also have Ryan Stevenson here, and he's a traffic engineer and has been instrumental in putting this application together. So I think it's better that he presents to you at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stevenson.
Good. Thank you, everybody. And so far, this seems to be going pretty smoothly, so I'm impressed. I'm going to go over. Mr. Belt did a good job of presenting what we're asking for here, and I'll just go into just a little bit more detail on it. The first slide on the screen that I think everybody can see just shows really the summary of the request. The lavender dashed line is the extension of Conley Street down to MLK Boulevard. It would line up across from the interchange ramp from Dawson onto MLK. And as part of that, it would require, this would require modifying the interchange to remove the ramp that's currently in that northeast quadrant. And a couple of other minor changes to the intersection terminal points where the ramp from Dawson to MLK comes off in the southeast corner. So yeah, this drawing shows you just a sketch or concept of what this may look like. You can see that Conley Street, kind of in the center of the drawing, goes through and comes down to intersect MLK. There are some additional lanes. You see it widen out as you get to MLK. It does, we anticipate more lanes for turning movements down at that location. And then there are some minor changes, as I mentioned, to the ramp, interchange ramp in the southeast quadrant to just make that more of an urban style interchange with a proposed traffic signal on Dawson McDowell Street. South of the bridge at that ramp location. It just gives you an idea of what that may look like there. And I will point out, we've been looking at this and working on this for several years now, and so there's a lot of time and effort, coordination with the city, with NCDOT that has gone into this. So just wanted to let you all know that. We could go to the next slide. So also, as Don mentioned, really the inspiration for this came from the Southern Gateway study. And as several things were mentioned in Mr. Belk's presentation, I'll just highlight a few here. You know, this and the next several slides are from the Southern Gateway study. This one just illustrates the different areas within the study. As was mentioned, we are up in the very northern end of this study. You can see also on this slide there are some physical and perceived barriers in some of these areas. So you know, we think that this change will really help to address some of those. We can go to the next one. This shows you highlighted in yellow. You can see some of the issues that have been identified currently in this area. The lack of sidewalks, pedestrian connectivity, bikes, lack of connections, the interchanges, you know, some of those things that are current issues that were identified in the Southern Gateway study that our plan, we feel, directly addresses and improves. We can go to the next one. So this shows you, again, we're up in this area identified at the very northern end. It's called a special downtown use. And these are these areas shown on this particular exhibit are the opportunity sites that were identified in the Southern Gateway study. So that's this shows you we are one of those areas, directly in one of those areas, the special downtown use area. We can get to the next one. Okay, this exhibit that comes from the Southern Gateway study just shows some key areas for access management within this Southern Gateway area, and you can see two of those are located right at this site, the MLK and McDowell and the MLK and Wilmington Street. And you can see sort of right in the middle there, maybe a little hard to see, there's a little gray line. It's going right in between those two circles, that is Conley Street. And by extending that down, we're providing really another very good connection between really Salisbury Street and MLK, and just will allow for development and connectivity in this special use downtown area. We can go to the next one. So wanted to highlight here that again, it shows some opportunity sites, but also shows some of the strategies for sort of creating these developments and improving this Southern Gateway area. Again, one of the things highlighted here at the top of this slide is the idea of public and private investment in this area. And so that's exactly what we're looking for here. This is really being initiated by private investment and development, and so that's really the catalyst for looking at doing this so far. So this really talks about how this plan envisions this area as more urban character. And again, that's with connectivity, with better accommodations for pedestrians and bikes and all modes of transportation. And again, this connection that we're talking about really allows for that to occur. The interchange is modified to be a little more urban with more sort of at-grade intersections and fewer free-flowing, higher-speed vehicle movements, at least on the southeast corner, southeast quadrant of that interchange. So that really makes it a little more urban, and it also just reduces the footprint of the interchange by removing the ramp. So that those things are really consistent with this Southern Gateway study. We'll get to the next one. So this is I'm sorry, can you back up one more time? There we go. So this slide shows the pedestrian and bike plan for this area. And the one thing I want to point out here just quickly is that you can see up near the top of that drawing, that right there where the cursor is, a green dotted arrow that goes into the site. And I just wanted to point out that we are accommodating that and plan to accommodate that with this request to allow bikes into this area. So next slide.
And I'm just going to warn you, you're 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes.
Okay. So I'll just real quickly, this is just shows a little bit more some of the uses in this area that we're talking about. It does show a sketch in the very right-hand side of that drawing that shows that interchange being reconfigured, and that's exactly what we're doing. Next slide. A cost for this, and just to let you know, talking about the private dollars and investment in this. So we're, with these changes, we're in the interchange reconstruction. We're in the $3 to $4 million range, for that estimate. And altogether, you can see a total there of over $6 million. We can go to the next one. So this is kind of the last piece of information here, but it's as I mentioned, we've been working with the city staff and NCDOT on this, and one of the meetings, the NCDOT just said they would like to get something sort of formalized in writing that sort of states the city's position or city staff's position on this request, and that's what this first slide shows, is just the letter to NCDOT. The paragraph highlighted in yellow just basically talks about the benefits of this interchange reconstruction and some of the benefits that it will provide. It fits more with the urban design that the city envisions for this area. We get to the next one. Again, all this is in the same letter, just trying to highlight some of this. The green paragraph, I won't read it, but it basically, that is taken directly from the Southern Gateway study.
Mr. Stevenson.
And so that was, yes,
We've
ma'am.
reached your time. Yeah, you've had 10 minutes.
Okay, so, I was basically done with it. That's a letter in support from the city staff to NCDOT. And then any questions you have, be glad to try to answer.
Sure. I'll go ahead and ask the first question. Could you explain, with the removal of that ramp, how people get to, who are going west on MLK, get onto the north? I think they're going to have to take a left at a signal to get on the ramp down, but I would like for you to go back to that map and tell us exactly if that's correct. Once the ramp is gone, how do they get from going west on MLK to north on McDowell?
That's great question. You are correct. There we go. Got the drawing up on the screen. So if you're coming west on MLK, you will make a left turn, following the cursor there to the west. You will make a left-hand turn right at that location there onto the ramp, and then that carries you directly onto McDowell Street into town. One of the reasons this works is that we are in a downtown area, and there are lots of options. So there's folks traveling west on MLK, they're gonna get to Wilmington Street first. So there are other ways into downtown, but that is the accommodation for that movement you mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I could not be clear about it when I was looking at the drawings.
Yeah, sorry.
I wanted to confirm verbally that was what I was saying. All right. So there are questions from any other commissioners. You can either raise your hand. Okay, so Jennifer Lampman would like to ask a question. So Jennifer, please go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Who currently owns the site, and who will pay for the build out?
Good question, Barry. You may want to jump in and answer. I can't remember the exact owner of the property today, but it would be a private entity developer who would fund these improvements. And Barry, I don't know if you want to add anything onto that.
Is my mic on at this time?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The land is currently owned by Capital City Urban Development, which is an LLC formed to specifically develop this site. And at this point, yes, it is something that we have offered to build out the extension of Kindly Street as part of whatever future development happens there.
Any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any hands raised, and I don't see, there we go. Jennifer is asking another.
This might be more for staff, but did we have anybody from our traffic division take a look at this change?
Hey, good morning. This is Eric Lamb with the City's Transportation Department. And yes, we've been working with the applicant on this. Reinhold did a pretty good job summarizing the approach to this and the history we've had on this so far, working with NCDOT. The key thing is that because of how low the traffic volumes are on that ramp going from westbound Western Boulevard onto northbound McDowell Street, it's a fairly easy conversion to add that in as a left turn. The applicants can be responsible for all the costs associated with the street extension and the interchange modification. All of this is consistent with the recommendations that we had in the Southern Gateway study, and we are okay with the proposal.
Any other questions for the applicant? I am looking for raised hands or chats, and I see none. All right, and I believe that we have no other speakers who have come to speak on this in opposition or in support. There was no room for anybody to speak in support. Did we have any last minute additions just in case? Travis?
We did not.
Okay, so seeing no other comment, I would like to entertain a motion. Please remember to be recognized before you make your motion. Motion should cite comprehensive plan consistency and include a statement why the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Commissioner who wishes to second the motion should raise their hand and be recognized. For all those in favor, oh, okay, so first of all, let's do that. So who would like to raise their hand and make a motion of support with a statement of consistency? Oh, come on, somebody volunteer. We need a statement. Do we have the statement of consistency in the package?
It's a comprehensive plan. This is David York. It's a comprehensive plan amendment. So
okay,
statutorily, we don't have to provide a consistency statement because by the very action, we're amending the comprehensive plan. So if you want to make a statement of reasonableness, I think that's sufficient. Okay,
well then I will make the motion to recommend approval because it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and looks to be reasonable and in the public interest. Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a second from Michelle McIntosh. Any other discussion before we make a vote? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Okay. And any opposed? So the vote is unanimous. All right. See, I need to make a couple of notes here. Sorry. Okay, so with that unanimous vote for this case, we'll move on to item C2, which is Z5419 Kelly Austin Drive at the intersection of New Bern Avenue and Kelly Austin Drive, immediately to the south of I-440 New Bern Avenue interchange. And to present this case from city staff will be Ira Mabel.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Ira Mabel, Planning Development. So this request is for just under 2 acres, currently zoned industrial mixed use 3 stories with the Special Highway Overlay District, version 1. You can actually see version 2 across the street, across New Bern on the other IX property there. And the request is for commercial mixed use 5 stories with conditions in that same shod yard. This case was before the Planning Commission in February, deferred to allow the ECAC to have their second meeting to vote on it, which was scheduled in March. That meeting was canceled. And so there is no CAC vote currently, but it is my understanding that there was no objection during their presentation at the first meeting. And your deadline is in May. I'll have more to say about that at the end. So just a reminder where the site is. There's 3 other uses on Kelly Austin Drive. There's a daycare and a 200-unit apartment complex. And those 3 parcels are pretty strongly bounded on the north and east by the I-440 ramp. And then on the south, I drew in the rail yard, and just south of that, or the railroad, excuse me, and south of that is the Crabtree Creek. And just off screen to the south is Wake Med, if that helps orient you. So 4 conditions on the case. The first, prohibiting uses that would have been incompatible with daycare and a residential development, basically. And the conditions number 2 through 4 there are some key elements that would have been in a parking limited urban frontage. Because of the way the UDO determines what is your primary street, which is how we apply a frontage. So all the rules in a frontage that say, front setback, in this case would have likely applied to Newbern Avenue. So these conditions are basically taking those main points. So no parking between the building and the street, pedestrian entrance and pedestrian access, and applying them instead to Kelly Austin, which is where the site plan will orient the front, so to speak, of the building. So entitlement change here, basically increasing 3 stories to 5 stories for the residential piece. Residential is permitted in IX, but not on the first floor. So this would be adding technically 3 extra floors of residential. You can see the retail still assuming the only first floor, and the office doesn't really change very much because our entitlement estimation has parking really as a limiting factor for how much capacity the site has. And the row at the bottom there for hotel is just because the applicant has expressed the intent to place a hotel here. It's not required in the conditions, but that has been the reason for this particular zoning district request. So the request is inconsistent with the future land use map, which is medium density residential. Consistent with urban forms, there is quite a bit of urban form here, and those conditions that, like I described earlier, that replicate some of the urban limited frontage make this consistent. You can see the core transit area just to the bottom of that map there is the buffer we have on the BRT corridor. So the last station on that line is at Wake Med, which is fairly close to the site. The bus itself will continue north, and there will be further BRT stops on the other side of 440. But the infrastructure, the road infrastructure, so the dedicated lane and all that goes along with it, will stop at Wake Med. So consistent overall with the comp plan, and consistent because of the use restrictions, consistent with infill, consistent with the frontage policy. The single inconsistency is basically just the future land use map issue. So that would require a amendment to the future land use map, recommending here a change from that medium density residential to community mixed use. And there is quite a bit of that flume designation to the south there on the other side of the creek along Newbern, where there's quite a lot of commercial development already. No other issues. Your deadline is in May. Due to the uncertainty of scheduling these meetings, however, I think if you're not ready to make a recommendation for approval or denial today, that we suggest that you request an extension. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions I can.
All right. Are there any questions for staff? And I don't have the view of everybody. There we go. So either chat or raise your hand if you have any questions, Mr. Mabel. All right. I don't see anybody raising their hand. So we'll move on to the applicant. I understand that Randy Herman will present on behalf of the applicant. As a reminder, the applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak. Please go ahead, Mr. Herman.
Yes, thank you. I don't intend to take very much time today because this has already been presented once. I'm happy to answer any questions. My understanding was at the previous commission hearing that my sense was the commissioners were ready to vote but wanted to defer, as Mr. Mabel said, to give time for the CAC to vote. And unfortunately, that CAC meeting did end up being canceled. As Mr. Mabel said, the intended use of this property is for a hotel, and specifically we see the applicant has been in talks with several brands. It's going to be a major branded hotel, and we see it as serving primarily the WakeMed campus as temporary housing for relatives of patients in WakeMed, and also for staff, doctors, and people who need housing near that facility. It does require a future land use map amendment, but otherwise, as Mr. Mabel said, we believe it is in keeping with the comprehensive plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I have my slides if I need them, but I don't intend to go through them today.
Are there any questions for Mr. Herman? Could we put everybody's faces back up? So thank you. I don't see any chat questions. Is there anybody who wants to raise their hand about asking questions? All right, seeing none, let's bring it back to the table. What's your pleasure, commissioners? Do you have any questions, concerns you want to discuss before we move to taking a vote? All right, seeing no one who wants to, here we go, Ms. Hicks.
I have a question about, and not maybe related to this case, but I think it'll come up in other cases as well. You know, what's our guidance for what is the commission as a whole thinking about? How do we handle these cases that had CAC meetings that got canceled due to coronavirus, and also then kind of missed the window for the CACs actually being an entity? And so how are we getting public feedback and doing it in a way that's fair to both the applicant and the public?
Director Bowers, or would you like to speak to that?
Well, so the situation we find ourselves in is that we don't know when there'll be an opportunity to have additional CAC meetings. And these cases were filed before the provisions for the second neighborhood meeting were in effect. So as you noted, they've sort of fallen through the cracks. Your options in front of you are either to move on the case without the CAC input in one direction or another. You could try to defer action on the case until such time as the CAC meetings could restart, noting that the time clock for general staff support for CAC will have run out, barring further council action. But that doesn't mean that the leadership of the CAC could not call a meeting using their own resources to hear and vote on the case. Then the third option would be to request that the applicant do some other outreach, which is not required of them under the code, and would be an unusual request, but those are the only options I could think of. I'll defer to the city attorney if he has anything further to add to that list.
Mr. York?
It's like any other case. You can move it forward with a recommendation for approval or denial. If you don't do that, my understanding from staff's presentation is you should at least forward a request for additional time. And you have that option. And usually what has happened in those circumstances, you provided the applicant with something they can do to address whatever your concern is.
Commissioner Miller, I believe you had a question.
Sorry about that. Yes, I do have a question. What kind of notice in this case was already provided to the neighbors in the surrounding area?
The standard notice for a zoning case, which includes mailing to property owners within 500 feet, posting of a sign on the property, as well as advertisement in the newspaper, and of course the posting on the city's website. The activity related to the case is posted to current development activity, and that is that's how it was noticed.
Gotcha. So even if we're not having the CAC meetings, the general public notice is still going out, and they could still reach out to us over email or any of the other avenues to add comment.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the presence or absence of the CAC meeting has no impact on the normal notice for these planning commission meetings. The CACs were never a codified part of the rezoning process. They were a usual and customary part of the rezoning process.
All right, so I think I saw Commissioner Lampton have her hand raised before Commissioner Winters. So, okay, so you just were waving your hand. All right, Commissioner Winters, would you like to speak?
Well, back to the point of the notification, but had there been any presentation to citizens? Because I thought that was a part of the 500 foot agreement, that there was at least some kind of correspondence with, and there was some presentation to citizens. Are you saying that that has happened and this was a secondary meeting, or had that primary meeting not happened yet?
So the meeting you're referring to is the pre-application meeting that is a requirement for filing the case. So, and this has not changed under the process of the UDO has always required that before you can file an application, you have to mail notice to people within 500 feet of the property and call a neighborhood meeting and submit a record of that neighborhood meeting. So that did occur in order for this case to be filed.
And as I recall, Mr. Mabel said that there were no objections raised at that meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Mabel?
Well, right. So there's the pre-application conference, which Ken just described, which happens to every case. This case had been to the East CAC one time. So regular CAC bylaws usually have require advertising before a vote. So standard practice is to have a presentation that's more informational, and then on their next newsletter for their next agenda, they advertise the vote. So this had been to the CAC one time for a presentation, and was in the hopper for the second meeting for their official vote, which under normal circumstances would have happened, and you would have had a vote on this particular case. But that meeting was canceled in March when everything was canceled. And so staff was present. I was not personally, but staff from our office was at that meeting. So my understanding was that there was, for those in attendance at that first CAC meeting, there was no real questions or objections to this particular case. So not an official vote, but it had been to the CAC one time.
Any other questions or thoughts about this case? Commissioner Miller?
My only other thoughts here are, given the extenuating circumstances of the global pandemic going on right now, I know that process absolutely matters, and soliciting feedback in these meetings matters. But it's not the only thing that matters. And in particular, during the time of a global crisis, I think we're all trying to figure out how to do our best. And, if there's any way that we could, while trying to continue to have progress and keep the world moving forward and keep the economy moving to the extent that we can. And when, having these meetings would be ideal in person. If not, if there could be some kind of virtual meeting, that would also be great. But at the very least, the fact that the notice requirements are still being observed, and that I would encourage every member of the public to who receives notice to reach out to us over email and to attend these virtual meetings if you have any concerns. And I am glad to hear that we've continued to do that, to engage in the process to the extent we can during these incredibly trying times.
Okay, Commissioner Tomasulo, I saw that your hand was up.
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
I'm having a little bit of struggle with with operations, but I agree with Blaney, and I also I do feel like this project has gone through a lot of the steps that they signed up to go through and that was expected to go through, and it does seem like even before the crisis, there were a lot of opportunities for the public to interact. So,
would anybody else like to say anything? All right, and I'm of the same mind. I typically prefer the second meeting or a vote from the CAC. I don't like the situation that we're in right now, but the virus is what it is, and there was notice, and there hasn't been any complaint or concern raised about this particular case. So I'm ready to move forward with it, realizing that this is unusual times, and I think we just need to let these people get on with doing something that seems to me to be a public benefit, because it will provide some housing for near the hospital and even walking distance to the hospital for people who need to visit their relatives there. So I'm willing to go forward with it. One thing I think I forgot to note was that we had no other speakers ready to sign up for this case. So we had no public input about it that wanted to come to this meeting or that knew about this meeting potentially. But we also, as far as I could tell, had no email about it. Do we know of anything different from what I recall? Okay, so with all of that said, and with our conversation seeming to come to conclusion, I am ready to entertain a motion on this case. So let's see. Sorry, I'm going back to my script. All right, so Ms. Commissioner Miller, would you like to make the motion to on this case?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion for approval of rezoning case Z5419. The rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest. It is overall consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the urban form, and it's compatible with and serves the surrounding areas. And the frontage conditions are consistent with the city growth center and transit emphasis corridor. So I'd also include a recommended amendment to the future land use map to community mixed use to consistent with this rezoning case as well.
Do we have someone who would like to make a second? Ms. Hicks, would you like to make a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
I
believe it's unanimous. Did anyone see anything any different? Okay. So the motion passes 8-0. So unanimously. Moving on now to new business. Item C2, Z281949 15 Lead Mine Road at the intersection of Town and Country Road and Lead Mine Road, about 3/4 mile north of Glenwood and Lead Mine Road in District A. I believe we have Ms. Ellis who will present on behalf of the city. Ms. Ellis, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it working? Can folks hear me now?
We hear you
Okay.
now.
Thank you. I'll just hold the microphone a little closer to my headphones. Sarah Ellis, City Planning and Development. This is case Z2819-4915 Lead Mine Road. It's a request to rezone just under an acre of land from R10 with conditions to RX3 with conditions. The Northwest CAC did vote on this case. They voted to recommend approval in a vote of 88 yes, 0 no, with 73 abstentions. I'll just make a brief comment on the CAC vote. This case appeared at the Northwest CAC at the same time as another case that drew a lot of members of the public. So that is why there was such a large number of folks voting. It seems that they were in attendance to provide input on a different case, but voted on this as well. The deadline for Planning Commission action is July 27th, 2020. The site is located at the intersection of Lead Mine and Town and Country Road, just a little bit north of Glenwood Avenue, kind of in the vicinity of the Crabtree Valley Mall. As you can see, the general land uses around it are moderate density residential, so it's a similar density of what's being requested. And the uses are a variety of sort of townhome and apartment type developments at a density limit of 14 units per acre, generally speaking, around the site. Its neighbor across the street to the east of Lead Mine, where it says institutional, is the Greek Orthodox Church, as well as a couple of single-family dwellings. And as you continue further north of Lead Mine and sort of into the neighborhoods, the density reduces down a little bit to low-density residential. Some views looking into the site. Again, it's located at the corner of two streets, and this site has some fairly significant topography coming from the street into the site, and you can sort of see that looking at view number 1 on the site, which is looking northwest. You can see the house is located, and this is an estimate, but maybe about 10 or so feet below the grade of the street, so there's a fairly significant drop-off. And as you can see on view number 2, there's some forestation around there and a similar sort of drop off from Town and Country Road going into the site. A summary of the proposed conditions are that residential density would be limited to no more than 14 units per acre, and outdoor sports and entertainment facilities would be prohibited. And I apologize, it just says outdoor sports and entertainment facilities. It should say prohibited. As you know, the existing zoning on the site is R10 with conditions. The proposed zoning is residential mixed use with a 3-story height limit and those conditions that would limit the density to just under 14 units per acre. It would allow for an increase in about approximately 4 units from what is permitted today. And it would allow for a small office or retail entitlement on the bottom floor of the apartment building type. The request is consistent with the moderate density residential future land use map designation, which recommends residential uses at a density of 6 to 14 units per acre, which is what the conditions have capped the density at for this site request. There's no urban form designation for the site. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, again, consistent with the future land use map designation, consistent with policies relating to compact development as this would allow for a slight increase in density on the site, consistent with policies related to single family lots on major streets, which would recommend that those are not an appropriate development type, and this request would perhaps make it easier for a different type of development to be located on an intersection of 2 fairly large streets. Also consistent with infill development as well as zoning for housing, and that it would increase housing choice in the area. There are no inconsistent policies with this request. And no outstanding issues. and the deadline for Planning Commission action is July 27th, 2020, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Please raise your hand or put a note in the chat. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the applicant. Ms. Diane Becker will present on behalf of the applicant. As a reminder, the applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak. I do want to note now, before I forget to do this, that we have no other speakers who signed up for speaking on this case. So we will hear from Ms. Becker now.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Diane Becker. I represent Mark Weitzel, the owner of the property. Mr. Weitzel is at the age where he's ready to retire and probably move back to the mountains where he came from. He listed this property for sale. It went under contract several different times through his agent, Ida Turbot, and all of those contracts were terminated by the buyer due to the development issues under the current zoning. I think if you move forward in the slides, it'll give you an idea. That's showing you where the property is, which you've already seen on the other maps, and the current zoning and the proposed zoning. And then Sarah showed you some of the pictures which are coming up here of the house. This intersection used to look differently. I don't know if you were here back in the 80s, but you used to come up Lead Mine and go to curve to the left to stay. And the road coming from the northeast was the one that had the stop sign. They reconfigured this intersection, and you'll see that Mark's house is level, almost level with the road in these pictures. When they reconfigured this intersection to put Town and Country off to the left there, it made his house way below the road grade. And when they did this, they also imposed some setbacks. There's a 100-foot setback from the Town and Country road that's going off to the left there. And there's a 100-foot setback from Lead Mine, which is the main road right in front of you there. So when they put those setbacks in, they cut essentially right through the middle of his property, which is making it basically undevelopable and unmarketable. I think if you'll move to the next slide, it may be the next slide that, no, these are more where his house used to be and where it is. This is a slide I wanted to show you. You'll see the 200-foot setbacks. They crisscross the middle of his property. You got a stream buffer in the back. So really there's not much that can be done on the property as it is. So he submitted this rezoning application to try to clear those constraints and make it more marketable and developable. Sarah already went through the conditions that he put on it about not exceeding 14 units per acre. This is a 0.97 acre lot, so it's below an acre already, and no outdoor sports or entertainment facilities. So really, we're just increasing the density a little bit from 10 to 14 units per acre with this new zoning. And it also would allow for small office or retail on the bottom floor, like if they did an apartment building there, it would allow for that. It's a great location. The bus Go Raleigh has stops on both sides of the road there, Lead Mine, so it would be great access to the bus line. The traffic impact was looked at by Sarah and the case planners, and they didn't see a significant impact from that. They said about 10 vehicles in the PM and 6 in the morning, and those were below the thresholds that would require a traffic impact analysis. So they didn't see that as being significant, apparently. Again, it is consistent with the area. To the north and west of the property, there's a large 16-acre apartment complex called Windermere. And to the south, there's some mixed residential that has apartments back through there. The church is across the street. And again, we went to the CAC meeting, and it was approved. And it's consistent with all the area that it's in the middle of. There's sufficient utilities, and it would give some better housing choices in that area. And it would definitely be more sightly than what's there now if this property were developed. So we would ask you to vote in favor of the rezoning.
All right.
And that concludes my presentation.
So are there any questions for the applicant? Please raise your hand or put a note in chat. All right, seeing none, let's bring it back to the table, so to speak. What are your thoughts? Well, seeing no interest in expressing any comments or concerns or issues, I will entertain a motion. So is there someone who would like to make the motion? Commissioner Miller, please make the motion.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve rezoning case Z2819. This rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest, and it's consistent overall with the with the comp plan. It's consistent with the future land use map, and it will increase housing options in this area.
Who would like to make the second?
Second.
I saw Tika first. Commissioner Hicks, would you like to make the motion?
I second the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Looks unanimous to me. Any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes unanimously. Making a note, and now we're moving on to this item C2. This is the item C2 is repeated for me. Anyway, we're moving on to Z520 New Bern Avenue on the south side of New Bern Avenue at King Charles Road, approximately quarter mile east of Raleigh Boulevard, District C. So I have that Mr. Mabel will be presenting on behalf of the city.
Yes, good morning again. Wait a moment for my slides to appear. Okay, so this is Z5, not 5020. Request to rezone 4.5 acres, currently split zoned. The front portion on New Bern Avenue, R6, and the rear portion, office mixed use, 3 stories. Request to rezone the entire site to residential mixed use, 4 stories with a green frontage. This case has been before the Raleigh Historic Development Commission one time in February. The RHDC was scheduled to hear it again in March. That meeting was canceled. So they had requested some information from staff, which was included in your agenda packet. So staff, RHDC or Historic Preservation staff did write a staff report, but RHDC was unable to give their final recommendation to you. And your deadline is in July. So the site is basically the entire block there at New Bern and King Charles, fairly close to Raleigh Boulevard and the Alamo Draft House as a prominent landmark. So mostly residential on the north side of New Bern Avenue, but quite a bit of commercial on the south side there, fronting on Pool Road, and then on New Bern Avenue itself. And then directly to the west is the Duplex Village complex. So quite a mix of uses in the nearby area. So photos of the site. So number 1 there, the current existing church, the Milner Church on the site, set back a fairly long way from New Bern Avenue, up to 200 feet in some locations. That photo number 2 there, just showing the rear of the site. So most of it is undeveloped, mix of unpaved parking and just some field space. And then that number 3 is the Russ Street on the west side of the site, but the eastern street is fairly similar. So showing the detached housing type on either end, or on the east side and the west side of the site. This is a map of the BRT stations, I'm not, to be honest, sure if this is the current thinking. So this is showing that circle right underneath the site at King Charles. I'm not quite sure if the current thinking is that a station will be there or a couple of streets to the east on Crescent Circle, basically across from where that, just north of where that square that says Longview Shopping Center is. But either way, very close and within walking distance of a BRT station in either direction. The site is in the Longview Gardens Historic District. It is only contiguous across New Bern Avenue. And that big parcel to the southeast is a golf course. The church itself, the Milner Church, is a contributing structure. So that is why this case went before RHDC, was because of the historic nature of the existing building. Number of conditions on the case. First, prohibiting some uses, requiring some landscaping. New Bern Avenue is controlled by NCDOT, so there is a little bit of uncertainty at this time. The final landscaping that will be required, they have to permit trees in their right of way or not. And then some other conditions about the historic nature. So the Mr. Milner's grave is on the site still, so the applicant is committing to keeping that. There is a condition requiring senior units. 80% of the site will be, of the units constructed will be occupied by seniors. And then the fifth condition, a documentation of the structure. So the expectation being that the church will be demolished, but that they will document it before that happens. The change in entitlement, so an increase in residential entitlement, quite a big decrease though in non-residential. So the office and retail go down quite a lot because of that removal of the OX zoning. So about half the site now would allow office and retail up to 3 stories. So removing that basically eliminates most of that entitlement for non-residential. This request is inconsistent with the future land use map, which is institutional. Institutional is a bit of a slippery flume designation. The way it's written points to an office district. So RX, while not incompatible with the area, you can see a lot of medium density nearby, isn't really a great fit for the institutional land use designation. The request is consistent with the urban form map. So quite a lot of urban form here laid on top of each other. Both New Bern and King Charles and some of the other fronting streets or boundary streets have designation. And this is directly on the BRT line. So an urban frontage like they have had included here is appropriate. It's consistent with the plan overall. A lot of policies about having more housing on the access to BRT line and transit in general. It is inconsistent with some of the policies about infill. So while the uses are compatible, you might remember from the street view photos I showed, the development on either side to the east and west is, single story detached housing for the most part. So just calling out that the 4-story building, while in a vacuum on New Bern Avenue on the BRT, is supported by policy, the existing development is quite a bit different. So consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. It would require a change to the future land use map. So from institutional to that medium density, which is adjacent on 2 sides of the site. And I see your deadline is in July, so there is a bit of time for this. I don't have good advice on if and when RHDC is going to meet next. Should you really be interested in their official recommendation? But happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Mabel? Please raise your hand. Matt, I can't see your face, so if you are still interested in speaking, chat me. And Commissioner Hicks, I believe you have a question.
I had just a clarification for staff. In the staff report, it says the existing conditions on the OX3CU portion of the site have, limit some uses and then also control some site elements such as driveway access lighting, tree planting, and utility screening. Can you give us any more specifics on that, just to have a sense of what those are for the future?
I can. So, looking at these conditions, limiting the number of driveway access, site lighting to be directed downward. So some of this, this is from 2002, the zoning on the OX portion. So some of it is going to be now redundant with the UDO. About mechanical screening from public view, which is now a requirement. There is quite a lengthy condition about trees, which I would have to read them more closely to remember all the details. But I think now is definitely would have been replaced by our current tree conservation requirements. So this site is greater than 2 acres, so tree conservation would be required. There isn't a lot of tree coverage on the site right now, but it's possible that some of the street trees along Newbern would qualify.
Other questions or thoughts? Commissioner McIntosh.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the Raleigh Historic Development Commission comments were going to be incorporated or have been incorporated.
I believe we may have historic preservation staff available.
Yes, I understand that Tanya Tully is available. So do you want to hear from her now?
Yes.
Okay. Please.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So there are no comments from RHDC yet. The case was at the one meeting and they discussed it, and it was supposed to come back again and has not had the opportunity because meetings have been canceled and we don't know yet when they're going to get to meet again. From my recollection, most of the comments were, around looking to see if there was going to be any possibility to keep the building, and if not, have some sort of documentation. And it looks like there is that condition being proposed.
Okay. I'm a little confused. We had a letter from March 12th that was included in the packet this morning, and there were 4 detailed comments, and one of them did deal with photographs and potential as-built drawings of the buildings. It sounds like, I just wasn't sure if RHDC was satisfied with the current conditions or if that's something we need to consider.
Keep in mind that our deadline for this case is July, so we could potentially try to wait for RHDC to meet again. Does anyone know if there's any plan for them to try to meet virtually like we're meeting?
They would like to, but nothing is being planned as of yet.
Yeah, so this is Ira again. I'll just clarify. That was a staff report, so written by member of City Planning Department staff that would have been presented to RHDC at their scheduled meeting in March. So they had met in February to hear from the applicant, and at that time requested some more information. So historic preservation staff prepared that report analyzing the case that would have been theoretically their discussion for a vote on an official recommendation last month. So that's staff's analysis, not an official position of the commission itself.
Correct.
Yeah.
Commissioner Miller.
Given that the public has had notice about this, and it looks like we have received some feedback as well from DHIC and the community outreach they've received, have we had any feedback from any of the neighbors regarding concerns about preservation of from a historic development standpoint?
I have not specifically about that issue. So far, I have had contact from Ms. Barber, who was signed up to speak later. I believe she's in support, but no other direct communication. Looking back now, they're all my emails. No, I have not heard from anyone about that.
Commissioner Lampton, do you have a question or?
Yeah, well, just a comment. I think we received an email from Greg Warren on April 20th indicating the level of engagement with the community. So I just wanted to point that out. So we may have some thoughts that kind of came out from those meetings.
Yeah, and we'll be hearing from him shortly. So since we have people who have signed up to speak for this case, in favor and in opposition, are we ready to go ahead and move to them, and then we can continue our conversation? Does that work for you guys? Okay. So I understand that Greg Warren will be presenting on behalf of the applicant. As a reminder, the applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak. And Mr. Warren will have whatever time he needs, but all other speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. So we will start with those in support. And Mr. Warren.
Great. Greg Warren here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I'm president of DHIC, which many of you know is a nonprofit developer of affordable housing. We are really excited about our plans to build affordable seniors rental housing on this property. I would note to you that this is a time-sensitive project since we have financing deadlines that we are seeking to meet. At this point, I would like to introduce Art Ross, Pastor Emeritus of White Memorial Presbyterian Church, who is here today representing the owner of this property, the New Hope Presbytery. Art?
Good. Thank you, Greg. And I'm assuming you can hear me also?
Yes.
Good. It's been a real privilege to work with Greg and Kayla and the staff at DHIC in a joint venture relationship with Presbyterian Homes of North Carolina, which operates the Glen Eyre community in Cary and 2 other senior citizens developments, one over near Winston and one near Laurinburg. This is our second relationship with DHIC and Presbyterian Homes. Presbyterians also started the towers development on Six Forks Road, Capitol Tower, excuse me, in the 1960s, and it's now being totally renovated under their direction. The Presbytery of New Hope, which is 113 churches scattered through 33 counties from the Piedmont all the way to the coast, now owns the property because regretfully the Milner congregation simply aged out and became a very small group of people, and we negotiated with them to close the church and under Presbyterian rules take over ownership. And part of the commitment was that we would turn that into a missional project serving senior citizens. And to fulfill that commitment with the former members, an administrative commission that I chair was created, and we are now seeking to do that. We have entered into a land lease with DHIC and Presbyterian Homes for 75 years with the commitment that it will be senior housing. And we are charging them a total of $1,000 for that 75-year lease. So we become a partner as the landowner. We are very concerned about the historic issues. Interestingly enough, Carter Williams, the architect of the church, daughter is a member of our congregation, and John Ramsey, whose father was an architect that collaborated with Carter Williams, is on the committee that's controlling the ongoing use. So you've got some very strong advocates for making sure that everything we can do to preserve, say, stained glass windows or other things will be done. But we can't guarantee until the design emerges exactly what we will be able to do. The same sort of thing about the trees. We're very committed to the trees, the landscaping, preserving a pastoral sort of setting for the residents, because our primary goal at the Presbytery is to ensure that we're providing really first-rate accommodations for senior citizens. That's our mission. That's why we're involved with DHIC and with Presbyterian Homes of North Carolina.
Thank you, Art. This is Greg again. I'd like to introduce Kayla Strampy, project manager from DHIC, to walk you through the rest of our slides.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Terrific. Could we advance forward on the slides, please? So before I get started giving a little bit more detail about the project, I wanted to show some examples of other housing that DHIC has done. And as you'll note, we do not skimp on the materials that we use. We ensure that the housing we create is an asset to the community in which it's built. So as you can see here, we use exterior materials like hardy plank. Could we move forward, please? We also use brick. We, in all cases, attempt to create areas for outside use for our residents. We move forward one more. As well as drive-through covers for the residents to ensure that they're able to access their rides without getting wet. Or you can also see another example of an outdoor space that we've created for resident use. Could we advance, please? As Art mentioned, this project is a partnership for the Presbytery of New Hope, DHIC, and the Presbyterian Homes. I think the reason behind this partnership, it will allow us to bring our expertise in building affordable housing in Wake County with the purpose behind the Presbyterian Church. Could we advance, please? As Art mentioned, we signed a 75-year ground lease and paid $1,000 for it. And with this particular ground lease came multiple obligations on the part of DHIC and PHI. Number one, we have committed to creating affordable housing for seniors of limited means for the entire term of the lease, so for 75 years. Number two, we have committed to maintaining and preserving the grave of Mr. Milner throughout the term of that lease, so for the next 75 years. We intend to build approximately 150 units of 1 or 2 bedroom apartments for the seniors of limited means. And rents would be affordable to folks who are earning less than 60% of area median income. As you can imagine, the majority of the seniors in the portfolio that we serve earn much less than that. The average income for a lot of our residents in that age group is less than $19,000. As we are aware, many of our residents are continuing to age in place longer because of a lack of affordable options. So we intend to not just build affordable housing here, but to also put in place resources for those residents that will help them do that for a longer period of time. We typically have on-site property management offices and an on-site service coordinator, which will help our senior residents connect with services that they might need, whether that's having difficulty accessing prescriptions or needing potentially additional care, such as an aid. That's something that we have on site. We also like to have amenities that are typical to what you'd see in market rate housing, like a fitness center, internet access, library and computer rooms, and game rooms. We also intend to utilize the beautiful outdoor space that's available on the Milner site. Our goal potentially would be to build something like a memorial garden surrounding the gravesite and its current location. As you note, we're looking at a green frontage, which not only complies well with the parkway-like atmosphere currently on New Bern, It gives us opportunities to create additional outdoor space for recreation for our residents. And as was noted previously, the current location is right along the New Bern BRT corridor, which will be excellent for helping our senior adults access medical and recreational services. And I'd like to pause there for questions.
Actually, is there more presentation? Okay, good.
That's the conclusion of the presentation.
Okay, so we still have 2 minutes for people who want to speak in favor, but we'll go ahead and have questions from commissioners if they have them. And I see that Commissioner Hicks would like to have a question.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a really commendable project. Providing housing for seniors that's really much needed for the city, and it's in a great location for it. I just wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about if you did any exploration with adaptive reuse of the existing structures.
That's an excellent question. And our first step when we began this partnership was to look to that. And what we ultimately determined was that it was not feasible if our ultimate goal was to meet the former congregation's ideal of creating affordable housing for senior adults on the site. And there are a couple different reasons for that. Number one, the current chapel that's in that location was built in the 1950s and would require a significant retrofit of the structure, whether we were going to use it as a recreational space for the residents potentially, or turn it into affordable housing. And given the time of the chapel's initial construction, we determined that it was highly likely, and we've now confirmed this with a hazardous materials survey, that there was the presence of asbestos and lead paint and other hazardous materials that would require extensive abatement. And the costs associated with the abatement of these materials were so prohibitive that it would make it almost impossible for us to create housing that would be affordable for the seniors that we're trying to serve. There were other issues as well surrounding the chapel's use being obsolete. Like we said, the congregation that was there wished to see affordable housing in place of it. And then there were also limitations as it related to the location of the chapel on the site. As was noted before, it's significantly far back from New Bern, over 100 feet. And in order to meet the frontage requirements for affordable housing for this project, we would need to be somewhere between a minimum of 20 feet and a maximum of 50 feet, which would compromise our capacity to build on the site. So for all of these reasons, we determined that it made the most sense to remove the chapel and fellowship building and education center from the site. But once we came to this conclusion, I just want to point out, we confirmed that the plans for all three buildings were already archived at NC State and would be accessible. We've also decided that as a project priority, as Art mentioned, we would like to try to use the materials that are in the church to the extent that it's financially feasible. For example, the stained glass windows. And we're also ensuring that some of the more notable architectural aspects of the church, such as the high vertical windows and gabled roofs and the color of the brick, are incorporated in our elevations for the affordable housing.
Okay, Commissioner Miller has a question.
Yes, Mr. Warren mentioned that there are time-sensitive deadlines due to different financing deadlines. Could you tell us a little more about the impact that a delay might have on this project? I know that this is already a bit delayed given the circumstances over the last month, and there are frequently tax credits and those kind of things involved in these projects.
Sure, I can take a cut at that if I raise my hand. Let's see. who's going to answer?
Go ahead, Craig.
Okay. Yeah, these are funded. These developments are funded with low-income housing tax credits, and there are 2 funding cycles available to us every year. And we're targeting to submit in May. When that second cycle opens up, we really can't submit until we finalize the zoning to make sure that we can get the correct unit count, unit mix. And so that's really what we're looking towards, is working towards that May deadline. Obviously, the need for affordable housing in our community is tremendous, and it's a long process when we're just starting out right now, but it's probably would take us 2 to 3 years before we could put units in the ground based on schedule. And we think it's important and imperative that we move quickly to meet this ever-growing need.
Other questions or comments for the applicant? Okay, I believe, oh, let's see. Is that Commissioner
I had,
Hicks?
thank you. I did have one question. Would you be comfortable putting into the conditions any sort of commitment to, as described, some of the architectural features or materials that that you mentioned beforehand? Is that something that is feasible? And if you did that, would that impact kind of how we're able to move this case forward?
This is Greg Warren. I think it's difficult to articulate now at this point in time what that would be, given that we have not commenced the detailed design work. And a good faith commitment, I'm not sure how that's enforceable as a condition. I would defer to your staff on that. I mean, we've articulated that as our intention, but know how to specifically make something enforceable on that basis.
Mr. Mabel,
The staff does.
can you speak to that?
Right. So without specifics in terms of actual materials or architectural features, it would be difficult to have an enforceable condition. As for the timing, I would say a new condition at this point would require a delay, a deferment of the case. So theoretically, if you meet again in May, some number of weeks. It's a little bit unclear at the calendar at this point. I can say that if you make a recommendation today, either way, it will appear before council next week for them to schedule a public hearing. So still thinking of a public hearing in May. I'm not sure if council is up to 2 meetings a month at this point yet or not. But a delay seems likely to have no public hearing until June. And like, I think Mr. Warren's guess is correct. A condition would have to be pretty specific as to what is required in order for a development reviewer to enforce it.
If I may speak, this is Art Ross.
Yes, please.
What I can say is that John Ramsey, who is on the commission of the Presbytery, that is a 4-person commission that's the partner with the HIC and Presbyterian Homes, is a architect of significant status. He has great interest in historic things. His father's the one that collaborated with Carter Williams on the building. And I can assure you that John is going to be looking for every possible way to keep alive architectural features. I can't guarantee you what he's going to be able to achieve on that, but the Historic Commission will not have a more professional or intense advocate for that as we go forward.
Thank you for those comments. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? All right, so I see there are 2 more people who haven't spoken that are listed in favor. One of them is with the applicant. Molly Stewart, I don't believe, has spoken. We also have Phyllis Barber. Is Molly Stewart here? And
I'm here.
Did
Thank
you want to
you.
say anything, or do you want to defer to Ms. Barber?
I would like to go ahead and defer. I'll just let you know that if there are questions, particularly for site context or mature trees, I have some slides about those if more information is needed. But I defer to Ms. Barber.
Okay. Ms. Barber, are you available to us? Ms. Barber?
I'm available if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Great.
Chairman
Yes.
Jeffries, if I could just jump in here real quick.
Sure.
I just wanted to
Oh,
take
sorry.
a second before Miss Barber spoke, just in the spirit of transparency, to recognize that Mrs. Barber is a client of mine, and that both she and I have no benefit, not benefit financially from this rezoning case, and I have no formal relationship to the zoning case, but just wanted to put that out there so everybody, to be transparent.
Thank you, Commissioner Hicks. I'm sorry, I forgot to put that in my notes this morning that you needed to speak about that. So thank you for jumping in. Okay, Ms. Barber, I believe you can proceed now.
Thank you. I appreciate this time. Thank you for receiving this input from the LGNA as residents impacted by BRT developments such as Milner Commons. We appreciate the role of your commission in helping navigate a period of rapid change in our area. It is our association's desire to make a tie to this work and to create a conduit for information sharing between the Planning Commission and the large body of residents in the Longview area. To that end, we wish to share the following points as a means of introduction and history. While the association is too new in its formation to have taken a position vote regarding this rezoning case, officers of the LGNA and most residents we've spoken to generally support the Z520-1950 New Bern Avenue rezoning. We welcome positive change and new neighbors, particularly development which includes housing types that increase affordability. Our city needs affordable housing, and we recognize that many seniors in our community would benefit from access to affordable options such as Milner Commons. DHIC has already proven its ability to meet the housing and residential service needs of their clients. As people who have chosen to live in this area of Raleigh, we want to help shape a positive future for the city. We seek a partnership with the city, DHIC, and residents to lead development shifts in our community with thoughtful considerations to transition zones, areas where new construction will impact existing neighborhoods. The association is encouraged to see transition issues being addressed in the BRT planning, and the openness we believe is present for these discussions. Setbacks from the street, creative use of green space, tree protection, and staggered progression up and down on height construction are all ways we believe transition area goals can be met while also meeting development and infrastructure needs. Milner Commons will set a precedent for how development should occur in areas that have transition zones intersecting with low-density residential communities, and specifically set a precedent for future development along the New Bern corridor.
You have 20 seconds.
As frontline residents that will live with these decisions into the future, we have great interest in these outcomes. Thank you for receiving these comments, and I'll defer to the commissioners to just read the history and background on residents' engagement in these issues, and I'll stop here and receive any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Barber? I don't see any raised hands, and I don't see any chat. So and that's the end of our time for the applicant and supporters. We did have someone sign up for speaking in opposition, but I understand that she is no longer available on the WebEx. So yeah, there's been no news about that. So we will move on. So please raise your hand if you'd like to say anything about this case, or you have questions or comments about it. Let's process it. So Commissioner Winters.
I just wanted to ask, I understand that the person that was opposing this development couldn't stay, but was there any documentation provided that we can review in lieu of her real-time comments?
This is Ira Mabel again. I had not spoken to her and was not aware of her interest in the case until she signed up to speak. So no from me.
anybody else had any communication with Ms. Miller? Doesn't sound like it. And so we have tried to call her and could not connect with her, so I'm not sure what her concerns were. So I think we'll have to decide whether we're going to process this case today without that comment, or hold it and potentially impact this May application for funds. So let's discuss. So what's your pleasure, everyone? I see Commissioner Hicks, and we'll start with you, and I see Commissioner Tomasulo. We'll go to him next.
Chairman Jeffries, it's unfortunate that we were unable to hear from the citizen that wanted to speak against the case. But I think in light of the schedule that this project has, been subject to, that it would be good to move forward with it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Tomasulo, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'll second that. And also just, the thoroughness that they've already been through, the support from the neighboring association, as well as how it ties into a lot of the plans and hopes for the TOD. I think that everything about this means that we should move it forward.
Hi, this is Travis. Before the commission continues to deliberate, I just want to announce that Ms. Miller did call back, and she had another appointment, but she does want to make some comments. So she's going to try to get back into the chat room so she can make a comment.
Okay, so she's coming right away. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So we'll give her a few minutes to try to get in. So it's a good time to have oh wait, we have a comment. Commissioner Hicks.
Yes, in the interim, while we're waiting for her to rejoin us, I just wanted to point out or clarify that it looks like they had the initial CAC meeting, and we're not able to do the second one because of current conditions. And so I just want to recognize that it's similar to the previous case, and I personally would vote to move ahead, even though we don't have the vote from the CAC.
Yeah, this is Ira Mabel again. That's correct. I believe this was even at the same meeting as the previous case at the ECAC.
And while we're waiting, if everybody wants to take a drink, because I don't mean a particular alcoholic drink, but if you'd like to take a sip of something while we're waiting for Ms. Miller to join us, I'm going to do the same.
Given the delay, I'll add my 2 cents in this as well. I just wanted to reiterate what Commissioners Hicks and Tomasulo have mentioned. Given the fact that there was a CAC meeting about this with significant attendance due to some other projects on that agenda, and the outreach from the Longview Gardens Neighborhood Association and the DHIC outreach, I would love to have seen a second meeting related to this, but given the fact that there's been, other than, wanting some conditions related to green space on the frontage that have been addressed in the conditions offered, we haven't heard any feedback from the neighbors regarding the desire for increased historic preservation other than the conditions offered. And this project really does offer a considerable amount of benefit to the city in terms of our policy recommendations and our policy goals in terms of affordable housing for seniors, expanding housing stock on the New Bern BRT corridor, and really furthering many of the policy goals, the key policy goals for our city and specifically this area. So I intend to support it as well.
I'm of the same opinion, and I think also something that I think that we can highlight is the partnership with the church and some of the architects and the various parties that are working hand in hand with DHIC to kind of preserve some of the feel of that community. So I think all of that's very positive.
Okay, before we continue, let's see if we have we do have Ms. Miller on the phone, so let's hear from her. Ms.
Hello,
Miller?
everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I apologize. I was on another virtual call as well.
Let me give you a heads up. You have 2 minutes to speak.
No problem. So I have a question, and I just want to make sure there are two different projects going on New Bern Avenue on my end. Sounds like a lot going on the other end. On my end, all the apartments by Elevation Baptist Church, I don't know what specifically the destination is. Is that affordable housing? What is that? And then I know that there is a proposal to increase the acreage for the mobile home park across the street. So can you tell me specifically which of these two issues you are addressing?
So does staff, would you like to back up the map so we can be clear and point out what this property is?
And unfortunately, I cannot see because I had to switch phones, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
So
this is.
So this is Ira Mabel. I'll try and give this a shot.
Okay.
So I'm going to guess that the zoning case she's referring to with the mobile home park is the Rogers Lane case.
That is not what we're covering today.
Right, that's correct.
Okay.
Which the zoning number escapes me. But I believe all that is, and just a quick Google map search of the church she just mentioned.
Past
is east of the Beltline.
Yeah.
Right. So past New Hope Road. So quite a bit distance from.
Yeah, this is next to the Alamo Theater, if that's helpful.
Inside the Beltline.
Inside the Beltline.
Okay. Okay, then I'm mistaken. I thought you were addressing the building that is going on by Elevation Baptist Church on New Bern Avenue. So I apologize. When I saw the note come out last week or 2 weeks ago that you all were going to be discussing New Bern Avenue, I was not sure what particular area. So I do have a question. However, I was listening to what you all were talking about the mixed use at New Bern Avenue by Wake Med Hospital. And my only question there is just traffic. What is being done to help alleviate the traffic on New Bern Avenue, or to help deal with, if you're building this 4 to 5 story facility, what is going to be done to help ease that already congested area of New Bern Avenue?
Are you talking about this case, or are you talking about
the hotel?
No, I'm talking about.
Yes. You're talking about the hotel down at the other end, down by Wake Med?
By Wake Med, yes.
Okay, we've already been through that case earlier today.
I know, I understand that, but I wasn't able to raise my hand. I kept hitting the question button and it wasn't allowing me to hit the question button.
All right. So I think what might be most efficient, is Eric Lamb still on the phone?
And with all these projects, I mean, I understand there's a lot of growth from one end of New Bern to the other. So my question is, again, what about the traffic? What is being done to help deal with the traffic that's going to be increased with all these facilities that are coming on board on New Bern Avenue?
I understand. So I think that is beyond the scope of what we can cover here in the Planning Commission today. And so I think we need to refer you to speak to our transportation folks. And is there somebody on the phone who can maybe speak with Ms. Miller offline or outside of this meeting?
As a result of this sign up, we do have her contact information, and staff will follow up for question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, these are both of my cases. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, great.
Thank you. And one last question. The facility that you are referring to, where is this going to be on New Bern Avenue? You've all discussed like 2 or 3 projects on New Bern. So where's this one?
Are you next to Alamo Draft House? Do you know where that is?
Got you. Yeah, so you have Alamo going on. You have the thing up the street at New Bern Avenue at the hospital, and then you have one further up the street. So 3 different. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. So we don't really have you here to speak in opposition. So we had no opposition to this particular case. All right, commissioners, we are ready to deliberate a little more, or we are ready to entertain a motion. What's your preference? All right, so I see 2 hands up, and they came up pretty much at the same time for me. So I'll start with Commissioner Winters, please.
Thank you. I think this is a wonderful project. I'm excited about what's happening, and we'll be voting in favor. I just also, in thinking of the a similar project we saw with on Oberlin Road with Martin Middle School, it would also be encouraging to see if with what are we calling with the center that's being created, if there can also be some partnership with the area schools. According to the map, there's Poe Elementary School that is somewhat in walking distance behind, and then there's Enloe High School, which would be across the street. Just to see that there could be some kind of worthwhile project to work out for the community, the seniors, and the students of the area.
Okay, thank you. And I assume that representatives of the applicant on the phone heard your thoughts, and do any of them want to speak to that briefly?
Kind of vision we have of having the community involved in supporting the residents and the residents supporting the community.
Okay.
Thank you, Art.
All right, Commissioner Bennett, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to ask, since Ms. Miller wasn't speaking on behalf of this project, I noted the involvement that had been done to date in Mr. Warren's letter. Were there any concerns raised at any of those meetings that we might be made aware of? And if so, how have they been addressed?
Let me ask, this is Greg Warren, let me ask Kayla or Molly, since they were in all meetings, to respond to that.
Sure. To the best of my recollection, there weren't any specific concerns addressed in the East CAC meeting, nor in the South East CAC meeting. There were concerns raised in the Raleigh Historic Development Commission meeting related to what had been done and why we had chosen not to go forward with an adaptive reuse of the existing church, which we answered through a memo to staff following that meeting, and also adjusted our conditions to incorporate some of the things that they requested, like the archiving of the plans and the photographing of the chapel. Other than that, to the best of my knowledge, there have been no other concerns that have been raised.
Okay,
thank you.
This is Molly Stewart. We did hear at the neighborhood meeting a concern about the green buffer along the New Bern frontage of the site. And given the green frontage that the comprehensive plan really points to in this area, we have a 20 to 50 foot build to in that area. So there will be a significant amount of space there before you even get to the right of way, which has further green space at the moment. And we've added to that a minimum amount of landscaping in that area in our conditions. So that's how we addressed that concern.
Okay, thank you.
This is Phyllis Barber. I was at I'm not sure if I'm able to be heard in this moment, but I was at those meetings, and I would say that can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. In that transition zone language, that was where it's all about how close up this project gets built on frontage to New Bern, because we believe that will be an influencer. And we recognize the struggle between being able to get the number of units desired and needed in the community. And one thought was things like getting some approval for fewer parking spaces so that DHIC would have the freedom to address that frontage and find that compromise between seniors having close proximity to walking to the bus stop and to goods and services. But I do think that the whole frontage of how that appears and sets a tone for that so that we don't have a rule go down where everybody builds all the way up to the closest possible point, will give some ability for some nuance as the properties are built in close proximity to low density. What I'm hearing today is that there's a lot of listening going on around that particular issue, which I appreciate so much. And it will make such a big difference in the way the at that intersection and for the corridor that is that look and entryway appeal will bear out. So thank you for that on the DHIC side, and that was raised, and story height was raised in the meeting that was at Washington Terrace. And we recognize that with the changes with the overall land use plan and zoning and BRT plan, that there's an encouragement to build up to as close as possible to the road. And we appreciate the exception of considering that in light of where this building is positioned.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barber, for those comments. Any other discussion among the commission members at this point? Bring it to the table. Okay, then I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Hicks raised her hand first, so please let us have your motion.
Thank you. Bear with me. I recommend approval of Z520 New Bern Avenue. This case is consistent with relevant policies in the comprehensive plan, although it is inconsistent with the future land use map. It adds much needed senior and affordable housing, and I'd like to note that it's a long-term commitment to affordable housing. It fulfills many of the transportation, housing, and frontage policies envisioned for this area. And I'd also like to point out the importance of their commitment to document the existing structures that will be lost, and also recognize DHIC's track record for this type of work and for doing excellent projects.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller, I saw your hand up. Did you want to put the second in?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I'm sorry, can we add in there the amendment to the comprehensive plan's future land use map?
Thank you.
Catch that if you said that.
I'll make a friendly motion to add a motion for an amendment to the future land use map from institutional to medium density residential to comply with the rezoning request.
Good enough? Okay, great. All right, all in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 That was everybody. Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. We're moving on now to the third item in new business, which is Z3819-2108 North New Hope Road near the intersection with North New Hope Road and Skycrest Drive. And I believe we have Mr. Belk from staff to present.
Good morning again. This request, Z3819, is to rezone 1.18 acres from R4 to R10 conditional use for the purpose of expanding an existing daycare center. The commission's deadline is June 22nd, 2020. This aerial view shows the site's proximity to other residential development and a commercial center and industrial area at the intersection of North New Hope Road and New Bern Avenue. This is a closer aerial view showing the site is located adjacent to the Wickford subdivision to the north and the Headingham Village neighborhood to the south. Also shown are the street views north and south on New Hope Road. These are street level views of the site, as well as a streetscape view of Wickford Forest Drive, which is to the north and east of the site. And this photograph the general character of the surrounding area. The rezoning to residential 10 is required in order to expand the daycare center's capacity to a maximum of 89 persons. Conditions would limit uses on the site to all other uses permitted in R4 excepting the daycare center. These conditions effectively restrict the site to use as a daycare center or detached single-family residential. The existing versus proposed zoning chart shows that a maximum of 9 single-family dwelling units could be developed on the site under the R10 zoning. Note that the daycare center's capacity would increase from 49 to 89 enrollees. The carbon emissions analysis, there is a sidewalk fronting the site along North New Hope Road, and a bus stop is located at the site. In terms of affordability, the proposal could add as many as 9 single-family detached units on smaller lots than the citywide average. It is transit accessible via Go Raleigh Route 15L. The proposal is inconsistent with the future land use map. The requested R10 zoning would push the permitted density into the moderate density residential range. Thus, it is inconsistent with the current designation of low density residential. For this proposal, 3 consistent policies were identified, along with the future land use map and the conditional use district inconsistencies. The deadline for action is June 22nd. There are no outstanding issues.
Any questions for Mr. Belt? I'm sorry, I can't see the view of everybody, so okay. Gotcha. So please raise your hand if there's something you want to ask. Seeing no one, let's move on to the applicant. I understand that Bill Gordon will present on behalf of the applicant, and a reminder that the applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak. Mr. Gordon?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am Bill Gordon of Design Solutions NC in Durham, North Carolina. Prepared the rezoning application for the Busy Bee facility. And I am in support of approving.
Excuse me for interrupting for a second. Could everyone put themselves on mute? I didn't see who was speaking, but there was some speaking overlapping. All right, go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Gordon.
Okay. I believe the increase of students will have a positive effect on the lives of parents with daycare-age children. The facility is well run, and it is a viable part of the community fabric. And I thank you for my time. And I may add, indulge me, the board for a second. All right. I have a slight stammer, okay? And I have to testify for that slight stammer.
No problem.
This past Monday after Easter Sunday is the third year anniversary of when I was released from Duke Hospital. I suffered a stroke and an aneurysm at the same time, and I also flatlined twice. And when I came out of the second flatline, I was in a coma for 3 weeks. And I had to learn how to walk. I had to learn how to write. I had to learn how to talk. And my mind is in good shape, as well as I'm able to write and draw as well. Okay. So thank you for indulging me at this time. Okay.
Yes,
and also thank you for my time to speak.
Are you done, Mr. Gordon?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we have 3 other people who are signed up to speak in favor that are associated with the applicant. Do any of those folks want to speak?
Yes, myself, Regina Williams.
All right, Ms. Williams.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for my opportunity to speak. My name is Regina Williams, and I'm just in position for the rezoning for 2108 North New Hope Road. I'm one of the owners of Busy Bees Learning Center, and I'm also the director. I, along with my mother-in-law, Jacqueline Williams, who owns the property, carry out the day-to-day operations of the facility. We began operating as a center in 2009 after expanding from a family child care home, which we started in 2006. I'm a mother of 5, and I have a degree in early childhood education and have been in the field about 27 years. I started the business when my youngest was 14, and I take great pride in being able to offer quality care at affordable prices to parents in the Raleigh and surrounding areas of the neighborhood. Being able to give them a peace of mind that their child is being cared for as our own while they're able to make a living for their own families. This rezoning will allow for the expansion so that Busy Bees Learning Center will be able to accept more children and families who are in need of such quality care that we have built our name upon, while also being able to provide employment to a few more creative and dedicated teachers longing to provide such care. Therefore, it is my hopes that the rezoning is granted for 2108 North New Hope Road and help us get one step further in achieving our dreams. Thank you. And thank you for your time and consideration in this matter.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. And we also have Bryant Williams. Did he want to speak?
No, he's just deferred it to myself. That's my husband.
Okay. And Thomas Day, did he want to speak?
Thomas.
Yeah. Thomas had to leave.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So those are all the people that have spoken up to speak. There were no people who signed up to speak in opposition. So are there any questions for the applicant from the commission members? I don't see any hands up. I don't see anything in the chat. So let's bring it back to the table. So what's your pleasure? Do we, Commissioner Winters, please speak.
So in reviewing the case, I do understand the question about expanding to accommodate more students. I was just somewhat, it just more so made me question the request to expand in terms of rezoning for more houses. Can you explain that, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to. The owners, they do need to rezone in order to expand the daycare facility. They also wanted to retain their residential entitlement. So their intentions all along were only to have the daycare. However, with the rezoning to R10, they would retain the entitlement to develop single-family detached residential. Even though the lots would be smaller, they would be as small as 4,000 square feet. Those do fit generally within the character of the neighborhood, and the request excludes other types of housing such as townhomes or apartments. So as mentioned previously, this is effectively, there's two things that can be done under the property if this rezoning is approved. Either the daycare center expansion, or should they sell the property at some point, it could be redeveloped as single-family detached.
All right, are there any other questions or comments? Commissioner Higgs?
Just a point of clarification. Am I understanding this correctly? They did have one CAC meeting with 8 attendees where they presented the case, and like the other cases were unable to present the second time?
We were unable to conduct the second CAC meeting due to the COVID-19 emergency.
And I believe I saw Commissioner Bennett, did you wish to?
Yes. Is there any concern, or has there been any examination of the impact of traffic that would be going and coming from the facility onto New Hope as a result of the increase to 89 students, or if there is the higher density housing there?
We did conduct an analysis based on the potential for single-family detached on this site. According to transportation planning, the increase in trips did not trigger the need for a traffic impact analysis. Again, this will be revisited, of course, at the site plan stage in terms of any potential improvements that might be needed. But that was, it was reviewed by our transportation planning staff during the development of the report, yes.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd like to bring it to a place where someone makes a motion. Would anyone care to make a motion? Commissioner Miller.
I'll make a motion to approve rezoning case Z3819 and amend the future land use map from low density residential to moderate density residential to comply with the rezoning request. This rezoning request is responsible and in the public interest because it is overall consistent with the comprehensive plan. It increases, potentially increases the affordable housing supply, and it is transit accessible from the Go Raleigh transit route.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Hicks.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no and raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Right. And that concludes our cases for today, unless I'm mistaken. And we need to move on now to the draft of the March 10th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Did anyone have any concerns with the minutes, or would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Hicks.
I move approval of the meeting minutes.
I'll second. Okay. All right. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Looked like everybody. So that is unanimous. The report from the chair. I did hear, I got a text back from CJ. He said he is in the ER this morning. And he woke up with a severe headache and a fever. So he's not well. Hopefully this is not the beginning of something really serious, but that's what I know right now.
I texted him as well, just for general concern, and he said he should be leaving the hospital here pretty soon, but he's pretty nervous.
Oh, really? He's nervous because of the COVID, or
they said it's food poisoning.
Oh,
but
okay.
just in general, he's kind of just nervous about everything. So, but he said he should be leaving the hospital
Okay.
soon. So
Good. Thank you for the update.
sure.
Earlier. So I thought this meeting went relatively smoothly. I don't think we missed anybody, and I think we pretty much stuck to the script. So I'm pleased with how that went. And I would be happy to get back on the every second Tuesday and fourth Tuesday if we can arrange that with staff. I don't know if that's too much for staff to arrange every 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, depending on where the meetings fall. But I'd be willing to do that. So, and I see now we have a report from the members. And so it looks like Commissioner Lampton would like to say something.
Oh, I just had a question about process, how this will go forward. I know Cooper has come out with guidance for the state. I don't know. I think Wake County and then, our mayor, I think there's several layers. What do we anticipate in general?
Travis or Ken, do you want to speak to that? I'm going to drop the formality at this point.
Sure. We don't quite know what the schedule will be for resuming in-person meetings. It could happen in May, or it might be delayed till later. I would have to go back and consult with the guidance that came out from the governor's office to give a better answer. When it does happen, we anticipate there'll probably still be social distancing practices in place as they were for our last in-person city council meeting. And, I think one lingering question is, having now dived into the virtual meeting pool, to what extent is there going to be an expectation that even live meetings will have a virtual component to them, particularly if we're unable to accommodate a full capacity crowd within chambers? Not that the planning commission typically attracts a capacity crowd, but the city council sometimes does. So those are some of the considerations that we have, and we'll certainly be keeping informed on what we anticipate going forward.
Commissioner Winters.
Excuse me. So first I want to just congratulate again. This was a wonderful virtual meeting, and also to thank staff for putting this together and making this possible. In light of meetings not happening in regular time the way we're accustomed, it's more a statement and also an ask. I took the initiative to also share the Planning Commission meeting and the agenda on social media to also give access to residents, so that another vehicle for them to be informed as to what's going on, giving them the opportunity to write in, call in. Also asking if Planning Commission can also share on their social media platforms the agendas. I saw it on the website, but I didn't necessarily see it in other vehicles or in terms of social media. Just another way of reaching citizen engagement, increasing citizen engagement, especially in this time in the time in which we are living. That was one. And then two, also with not residents, but with developers. And in this time, is it possible to also have social media meetings or Zoom meetings, or coordinating something somehow, so we can still hear from citizens as well in real time, and they can hear from citizens in real time?
Any thoughts from staff? Or Ken or Travis? Any thoughts? Okay.
I'm sorry. I'll admit I was trying to respond to something and didn't quite.
Shame on you.
Okay. I know. Shame on me. Catch all of that. I think the general gist was opportunities for folks to participate. We are always looking for better ways to get the citizens engaged. I think this whole experience of having to look at remote participation in virtual meetings has really, pushed us to start using technologies that we had, but we never deployed in this way. So we're going to continue to look at those, how we can utilize this type of technology going forward.
Okay. Well, are there any other reports from the members? We can talk about further arrangements for meetings outside of this format, in email and conversation.
And we will.
Okay. Matt, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I just had questions about, and I know that this fits in line with all of it, but, we have our normal meetings, but also the fact that text changes are starting to pile up, that I think not all of them were immediate, but, or necessary, but just curious what the plan is, aside from kind of punting today, on how committees might work through certain things.
I'd like to see us have our text change committee meeting on the 13th.
Okay.
And by the way, SAS has got us working from home until the end of May now. So I don't know if they know something that the governor doesn't know, or they're more able to say out loud, because it's not a political situation for them to say that we're probably not going to be ready on May 8th to resume more normal life. But anyway, I intend to sequester as much as possible between now and May 31st. Lanny.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. You said the text change committee on the 13th. Did you mean the 19th or?
Yeah, the 19th. I'm sorry. The second. Yeah, the 12th is the 12th is our next
regular commission meeting.
Yeah, and so the 19th. I apologize.
Okay, making sure.
All right. Any other reports from members? Okay. Well, let's move on to anything worth noting in pending items, other than the fact that we've got a lot of text change stuff piling up. All right. And the report from the planning director.
Okay, so if you have the memo in the backup packet, there were not planning commission, city council met on April 7th and acted on a large number of items that were on the public hearing agenda. They included the 2 street name changes down on Tryon Road, as well as 7 zoning cases. Z3219 on Sunnybrook Road, Z4419 Depression Lake Road, Z4519 on South Street, Z4919 Rock Quarry and Sunnybrook, Z220 and 5219 on Jones Franklin Road, and Z320 on Birchwood Street. All of those were approved. There's 5 public hearing items that have been continued to May 5th. They include the comp plan amendment on West Morgan Street to remove parts of the West Morgan Street extension, the Swift Creek Watershed comp plan amendment, Z2319 on Strickland Road, Z2319 North Rogers Lane. That was one of the items that the lady from New Bern Avenue was calling about, and Z120 on Overland Road. Z4119 Millbrook and North Hills Drive was scheduled for public hearing on June 2nd. And then there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not applicants will be able to use a virtual neighborhood meeting, meet the UDO requirements of holding a neighborhood meeting prior to filing a rezoning application based on guidance from both the state attorney general and our own attorney's office. The answer to that is yes, but staff wanted to provide some guidelines that applicants could follow for procedures for hosting a virtual neighborhood meeting that, in the opinion of staff and the attorney, would meet the requirements of.
If there are virtual meetings, that it is possible that these WebEx meetings can be recorded, that they record those meetings, and that's part of what goes on.
Noted. I believe, although I have to double check, that is part of our procedure.
Of Shelley.
Is it also possible that they can be uploaded or shared on the city's YouTube page and other platforms of social media?
We could look into it.
So Nicole said that she was having a hard time hearing you, Ken.
Okay. I'm not sure what to do about that at this juncture.
Yeah, there's a recording, so.
But because I haven't changed anything about my audio setup here.
You just got quiet.
Okay.
So,
my response was we could look into that. I can't commit to posting it at this time.
Okay. All right. So is there anything else before we adjourn the meeting? Have we missed? Tika.
Well, I would just like to also thank all of you. I think this, our first attempt here at a virtual planning commission meeting went remarkably smoothly. There was a lot of pre-work that went into making this a reality from both the staff as well as the commissioners, and congratulate everyone on a job well done.
Well, and thank you, Travis, for putting together the script. It helped. And
Yes,
Tika,
I just wanted to
say.
I just wanted to say thank you to staff and fellow commissioners, especially the staff for making this as easy as possible and easy to follow and connect with. And anyway, for our first successful meeting.
Cheers. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
All right. You guys have